Well, thank you. And Dave, thanks for the revisions and keeping this thing moving along in the right format, because we had some challenges there in our meeting earlier. Okay. So we'll just go through the document here. There may be a couple of places where we still have some clarifications that we need, but yeah, I think the usual boilerplate here at the front. Recalling the purpose of this particular meeting is to review progress and provide guidance for the upcoming interim and annual meetings, and any requests for more significant substantial research items are deferred until SRB017. So we've noted when for some more substantial requests that they'll be expected at SRB018. Okay. Yeah. So for the observers, as usual, we note their inputs at the beginning of the meeting, but I wanted to add something here actually. Which it was something, I'm not sure if it was in the peer review or not, but I think there was a point made at some time in the meeting about the observers and how how important they are to especially to the MSAB, and kind of serving as this kind of go between, seems like between SRB and MSAB, and that's a really valuable contribution. So I've been meaning to put this in, so I'm just going to do that now. And maybe we can check officially later whether something was mentioned, which I believe there was in the independent peer review. I'd have to go back and look. So we can update this later offline or something for that particular thing. But I do want to express my thanks to the observers for the work they do. They serve an important role here. Okay, so I'm just going to scroll through the various paragraphs. I'll just call out the paragraph and people can respond as needed. I'm going to assume people are not reading this in real time, that that you've gone over the various sections and highlighted where we need to deal with something already. Okay, paragraph 11. 12. So that was on the first short presentation on the FIS. Now the longer, more involved one, section 4.2, paragraph 13. This is not that controversial that we're noting things. 14. 15.
Just whilst we're at it, we were seeking a couple of clarifications on the FIS survey itself. We just wanted to confirm there was some differing opinion. So if Ray can just confirm that there's 4 separate models without interaction between each other. In other words, there's no transfer of data or anything, and that they use different covariates to prevent loss of spatial structure in the absence of data. Is that right?
Ray doesn't seem to be online, but Ian, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I don't think we have any disagreement with where you're headed with that comment, Sven.
No, it wasn't a disagreement. It was a comment. It was just we wanted clarification because we weren't quite clear how these things was modeled. There was some uncertainty over whether to what degree those models interacted, et cetera, But I assume because he was able to do the predictions for 2020 for the areas without sampling that they're entirely independent. And there was the other question of whether they have different covariates, habitat, depth, and et cetera in them.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, so he was able to update those. There are different covariates in some of the areas. 2A is an area where we have a latitude covariate for the southern tail of the distribution. So he was able to update that analysis even without the data. I thought this bullet was more about just the timing question and making sure that we're clear moving forward that we don't have the in-year data when we have to create the next year. So I think that was a good point that you made earlier in the meeting, that even though it might seem like it's there's no lag, there's in fact a 1-year lag in the design basis.
Yeah, no, it wasn't specifically with his comment. Sean skipped over it a little bit earlier when I meant to make the comment. So that was just a clarification in general for us because we weren't so sure.
Yeah, so, Ian, Sven and I had differing opinions on whether it was one model fit all together or whether it was 4 separate models fit to each of the regions.
Okay, it's in fact 8 separate models. Models fit to each of the IPHC regulatory areas. But the way Ray deals with the boundaries is that he includes data that overlap so that any information, any correlation among stations will be maintained, but then he only predicts back to the IPHC area that he's working on. We've been working on extending this into being able to do multiple areas at the same time, but mainly just due to technical, how long it takes this thing to run. It's easier to do them separately. If we were to start combining them, then we would also have to be able to have indicator variables or something on the model parameters, because we do need to allow, for example, for different depth relationships in different IPHC regulatory areas, different levels of spatial and temporal correlation that we estimate. So we wouldn't want to just assume that those are constant across the entire range of the stock.
Great, thank you.
One last question then. How did he manage to do the other areas when there is potential overlap from adjacent areas? In other words, if area 4, which I think he's done, the ones at the edge, there may still be some impact from the area 3 data if he has that joining element in there, right?
Well,
I'm here now.
Go.
If I can answer that, apologies for being late.
Right.
There is no area 3 data that overlaps area 4 this year because they only fish the eastern part of 3B. So the areas that I've done, and likewise with regulatory area 2B, they didn't fish the southern portion of that, so there's no overlap with 2A. And that's what allowed me to do those areas independently.
Thank you.
We had one question, Ray, and I know you've mentioned this before, but I can't remember it. Given that some of these regulatory areas are adjacent to one another, but you're running the model on an area by area basis, how are you accounting for boundary effects?
So I do include some overlap to a certain degree to account for the fact that there is influence through the spatial correlation from stations across the boundary and adjacent areas. So when I model a particular area, it includes small part of the neighboring regulatory areas as well. And so the data from those do feed into the model, but I am estimating a single set of parameters. I'm not allowing the parameters to differ from one area to the next within that model that's focused on a particular area. So in effect, that can have, if were you to, in theory, we could get predictions, 2 sets of predictions for the stations in those areas of overlap, because I'm modeling them twice, but I'm not interested in that second set where it's just extra information to help inform the model in their area of focus. Does that help?
Yeah, so you're using both the covariates as well as the weighted numbers, or just the covariates for those adjoining boundary areas?
It's the data. I'm using the data. So the data from a small part of each adjacent area is included in the model for the area of focus, the area that's the focus of the modeling. And but then I fit a single covariate model for that, noting that 90% or whatever more of the data comes from the area. And so the covariate model is going to be driven by the information in that area, and only to a small degree by the information outside the area. So by fitting models, separate models to different areas, I'm allowing the covariates to vary, but spatially, but there is a small influence on each relationship from a few stations in each adjacent area.
So for years like 2020, where COVID precluded the sampling, and those areas that were not sampled are still adjacent areas, you have no data. You have the covariates, but you don't have the data. In other areas, the sampling design, which isn't exhaustive, but is a subset of the site, then you have data in transboundary regions, but not the same spatial contiguity of the data. So have you done any work to look at what the potential effect of that is in the transboundary data that you normally would use?
So in this case, if I understand you correctly, we're talking about area 3B, which is the one that wasn't fully sampled in 2020, but was sampled. And so there is some, you probably have to help me clarify your question, but there is some influence from data across the boundary in 3A because we include that in the model, recognizing that the spatial covariance continues for some distance beyond the boundary. Spatial correlation continues for some distance beyond the boundary. And that influence, I guess, if you were isolate 2020, might be a little more because that data is a greater proportion of the data, total data that goes into 3B than it is in a typical year. Is that the gist of what you're getting at there?
Right. Well, there'll be some years potentially where you're not sampling a transboundary area adjacent to another area. You're not sampling it exhaustively. And I was just wondering, since you don't have weight or numbers data, all you have is the covariate, whether or not that would affect your prediction in the space-time model.
So the parameters, all the parameters they're not temporally varying. So the effect would be very small. These parameters are estimated over entire 28-year time series. And so if you have a year in which something's missing on the boundary or across the boundary, it's not going to have much of an effect on the parameters of the model.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on. You are up to paragraph 15, 16.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify with Dave that we're normally asked not to recommend or endorse things in June, right? In the June meeting.
That's correct. So at this meeting, you're being asked to either make a recommendation, which will go to the commissions for its consideration, or if you just want the Secretariat to continue particular work avenues without the commission's specific endorsement, you just put it as requested.
Yes, my question was that the workflow that Ray presented for evaluating and approving the FIST or endorsing the FIST or recommending the FIST design requires us to do that at the June meeting. And if that's a change in policy, we need to be aware of that and discuss that. I guess that was my only point.
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair, that's a good point, and that's certainly sort of best practice for us to ensure that we can have it provided to the commission at the work meeting and then the interim meeting for their final endorsement. If you wanted to comment on how feasible that is for you, please do. I'm just trying to, which paragraph? We're talking about paragraph 16 here.
That's right.
Yeah, so what additional sort of clarification are you after here in this regard?
I believe it was something, I think the work plan only mentioned that there was an SRB review in June. Mm-hmm. That there wasn't actually an SRB action item. For example, you know, if we're expected to provide an endorsement, then maybe it would be SRB review and endorsement or something.
Sure. I mean, no, that makes the most sense. I mean, there's always the potential for additional modification and review at the September meeting, but the preference is for that June approval, so to speak, of the coming year's design.
Yeah, I just was trying to make sure we don't box ourselves into a corner procedurally. That's all.
Okay, no worries. That should be fine.
That's just would be a simple update of the workflow. That's all. 17. This was originally we had asked for just a review to go back and have a look at derivation of all the hook competition, and then Ray subsequently provided a draft of this list, so kind of incorporated our original one.
In fact, you provided the list and I provided the preamble part to it.
Okay.
I think originally you had very specific requests, and my suggestion was that let's present a review first, and because that may lead to different questions. I'm fine with having these as the things you're interested in now, but I would expect that once you've seen the material, you may revise the things you're interested in.
Okay, so for A, for example, where we're requesting a preliminary study, is that something you think we should defer until after we've seen the review?
I think the wording as present suggests that. It says you're interested in this. You're not requesting it as the wording appears here, and that's my preference. I think there's material. I don't want to say concern, but this stemmed from an informal discussion rather than a formal presentation. I think the SRB would benefit from having a formal presentation prior to making specific requests. So I'm okay with the way it's worded here, because it just expressed the SRB's interest. So we can attempt to head off some of these things in the presentation, but without the specific formal request in there, as that may evolve once you see the material.
Ray, that sounds good. And if there's if there are any written documents as well that we could reference before that, that would be very helpful.
Absolutely, I can put together those. Thank you, Olaf.
Great.
Okay, that wraps up the FIS, the stock assessment, paragraph 19. Noted, of course. 20. 21. Not very controversial. 22 is a noted. 23. $24.
Sean, this is Ian. Just a point of clarification on 24.
Mhm.
The goal here is essentially just to keep the SRB abreast of our consideration of platform that we're using. This is certainly an ongoing and essentially never-ending bullet that could just be rolled over forever, probably in SRB
Yeah.
reports. Okay.
Yeah, that's we actually talked about this because it seemed like it was a request we had made earlier and that you were following up on, and so that's what we figured, that this was just to keep it rolling. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. The peer review of the MSE process. Um, 26. 27. So this is, so here we're just trying to emphasize some of the points that the peer reviewer made that we agreed important. Particularly B was one of the ones that stood out to us as something worth repeating, that the short-term contract status of some of the MSE team is not really consistent with the long-term role of the MSE. So that the commission consider establishing something more permanent in that case. Because this first round is not going to solve all the problems at once, and we thought that was important. Obviously, we were really impressed, as we'll note later, about the tools that are being developed to improve communication and participation by stakeholders, as well as commission. D here, the exceptional circumstances. We agree that that is definitely something that should be considered, but we don't necessarily agree with the examples that were given. So, and I'm not sure if we have something down below. We'll have to make sure to keep an eye out for that, because this is a fairly important topic that needs to be treated fairly carefully.
Yeah, Sean, this is Alan.
Yeah.
I would agree with you there. And I thought another conversation we had about exceptional circumstances was that it may trigger the necessity to revisit the MSE and do, a revisiting of the operating model and, the bigger picture of it rather than just running simulations. And I will note, we can talk about this below, but I don't think there's any points on the SRB's take on the exceptional circumstances in the bullets below.
Okay, so we'll have to write one.
Okay.
Because we in our discussions, I mean, I provided what I thought was the most specific example I could think of for this particular case in what exceptional circumstances would mean. So just remind us when we get down there. We'll have to write that one.
Will do.
28, I guess, I mean, we could have put this in with what we agreed with, but we also wanted to highlight that further, you know, this is going to be an ongoing thing that okay, the biological and ecosystem science program, 29, 30.
We're going to just get some clarification what you meant there with the SRB acknowledge the following points. I think then goes into a range of other text. Is that necessary, that highlighted text?
I don't think so.
Okay, so we'll just put a full stop after request.
So we obviously we're pretty pleased to see this new research integration plan. Definitely, you know, continuing to move in the right direction as far as research planning and integration across the different programs. And we had some suggestions for things that could be added to it in particular, and we didn't yeah. We have some specific items below, so this one's fairly general. $32. That's a big one.
Just a tiny edit there, Sean. Fourth line down, stock assessment at MSC was viewed positively.
You've got stock assessment spelled out and MSE short, and normally it's SAMSE.
Yeah, true. And if we have a list of acronyms above somewhere, that would be helpful.
And the headings.
Chair, if possible, could we break this paragraph in two, because you really have a recollection of previous requests and some of the actions that have been taken, and then you actually got the request. So would it be possible to break it, yeah, there, where it's during, and so it just says the SRB requested that, if possible.
Sean, MSC is in the list of acronyms in the beginning, but stock assessment is not.
Okay. Dave, do you want me to scroll up and do that, or?
Oh, that's right. We'll do a check for all acronyms and make sure it's standardized.
Okay, 33. I don't see any, I thought we had some specific examples, but I think we did definitely talk about this. And, you know, we provided some relevance for stock assessment when a question came up about that. Ian gave a very eloquent answer that would have been nice to see in the box. So that would apply to all of that.
I think we do have some specific examples, specific questions for, I think it was both certainly the histology, yet at things like that. So they're in those sections below where we have specific requests.
So there could be something here that says, see paragraph something. Okay.
Sean, could I just confirm that your track changes is on? I think it is. It's just you're in edit mode. Just otherwise I won't be able to find things.
It's on. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
There it is. I don't know what's going on with my computer. Sometimes these things randomly, the colors disappear and then they reappear. I think I might be, I feel like I'm not in markup mode, but I am, so I don't know why. It's not showing. Okay. 34. $35. 36. I think this is a, it's going to be kind of an ongoing issue at times. It's almost like it would be helpful to have almost a template presentation that starts out with a question, kind of what led to a particular question, and then basically going through the scientific process from there, coming up with hypotheses, what those specifically were, what experiments or surveys were going to be done, how those surveys and experiments are evaluated in terms of their design, and so on. For instance, one thing that came up was the SRB had some questions about, I believe it was one of the tagging DMR studies, and then it was clarified that the power analyses had all been done, which we had never seen. So that kind of information would be helpful up front.
Though I think we still haven't seen the power analysis. We were just told it was done.
Right. 37.
Sean, if I may make a comment, this is Giuseppe Planas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I note the comment, and it's well taken, and I think I think for us it would be really important to get or to try to get the SRB's input into the new research plan. I'm just wondering, and Dave will fill in probably some of the details, is whether there's a possibility of intersessionally providing you with our one of the first drafts of that plan that is in progress right now. It's not completed. That's why you have not seen it. So I'm just wondering whether there would be a possibility of not waiting until June of 2021 for you to see the 5-year research plan and provide input to it. But rather request your input prior to that meeting intersessionally.
So we had this discussion about this research plan would be adopted at the annual meeting next, whatever it is, January, February. So kind of stepping back from there, there's the interim meeting, which would be, when is that? That's usually early December.
It's I think it's earlier this year. Is in I think it's the first half in November,
First
or
half
around
of
or around mid-November, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay,
I don't
so
have the dates.
All right, so mid-November, which would mean we'd have to have provided comments to you by early November or the end of October.
Yeah, look, if I could just chime in, one of the strengths of the SRB members and the IPHC Secretariat's relationship is that we do work intersessionally on a range of topics. And Kim's been very proactive recently with the genetics work. And so what we should be doing, and then what we will be doing, is having that informal intersessional discussion, sending back and forth ideas to get your additional input onto the range of priorities that the Commission has set to help us try and prioritize them as well and structure it into an overall plan. So between now and then, obviously, we're not looking for formalized SRB input, but I think all we can sort of hope for at this point is some additional informal commentary back and forward and help guide us in terms of putting that overall plan together.
Yeah, so I suppose, yeah, that was my understanding. I'm just trying to get a timeline here of when things would have to turn around, but I guess you don't need a finalized plan for the interim meeting. It's just I suppose that's when you would present it to the Commission and get their input and then have another round between the interim and annual meetings.
Yeah, that's correct.
So, yeah, so we wouldn't have to, in any case, I would think we would have to get a draft of this within the next couple of weeks. If we're going to be able to, to get it into my schedule, I'll need to have a good amount of time to be able to do it.
The other thing that I think is important, that those points we made about the hypothesis tested and all those in the presentation, well, if that information is already there and we don't have to start searching for it and looking around for it, then it'll be a lot easier or a lot quicker turnaround anyway.
It's the 5-year, right?
They've used 5-year as in spelled out 5.
I guess intersessionally is not a word. Whatever. Anyway. Okay. $38. This kind of is similar to 36. Kind of seems like it's the request following from 36. $39.
I think you can remove 37 if you have 39, right? Isn't that?
Yeah.
I think it was just an elaboration of that and got copied.
Yeah, we already dealt with one request. 39.
So just to chime in here, in trying to cut and paste and insert it into this paragraph, I've reworded some of it where you had requested throughout. Now, so please do take a look, because otherwise it becomes a very, very, very large request that would be replicated in a whole range of documents. And so one way to get around it is as it's currently written. The other one is simply to make each of these a new subheading and then have a related noting or request. So however you'd like to proceed, we can amend it.
Well,
I was under the impression this bit was actually a request rather than a note, rather than a mention, say, future research should develop. I think we were requesting.
well, like
certainly.
A is not. I mean, A is what it is.
No, sorry, I was at
But
B.
this one here, B?
Yeah.
So Dave, can we make a couple of requests within here?
Yeah, so the easiest way to do it so we're not replicating all of the notings with the request is simply to make each of these a sub paragraph. So for example, paragraph 39 at the start would just end with involving a range of requests as follows, or something along those lines. Then migration and distribution would be a heading, a subheading, and where it says studies, it would become a new paragraph essentially. And so then if you are okay with us breaking it up in that way, and you just go through and you highlight wherever you want a specific request, and we'll break it into a new paragraph with a new paragraph number, so it's easy to move around and report on.
Okay. I'll just leave this. Yeah, okay. So for example, here,
Oh, there's a point of clarification there too. Can I just ask Josep, could you clarify? It was my understanding from the presentation that there was one single fish in November that was potentially a skip spawner. The other is in or October, November, December, January that were green were all immatures. Was that the assessment you made?
That is correct.
Yeah.
okay. So we're on 39B. C. I guess we're noting again, but we're so Dave, you probably don't want this, right? Or is this okay?
Yeah, sorry, so C would become a new subheading 7.1.3, for example. And it would just be the SRB noted the ongoing studies at, etc. And then this would be a new paragraph where it would say the SRB requested that the Secretariat provide.
Okay, so I'll just put that in here. Okay.
I think that then needs to be a separate paragraph, I think is what Dave was saying. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Dave's going to do that. I'm not,
yeah.
I'll mess it all up here. Okay, so let's see.
That last bit's a request again.
So this is going to stay within the noted that's above, right?
That's correct. Yeah, so I'll just insert the noted.
Okay, paragraph 40. $41. 42. 'So is this a separate paragraph in the request, or just keep it here? Say that.
Hi, this is Giuseppe. May I ask some clarification regarding the last paragraph?
42?
I'm sorry, the last sentence in that paragraph, number 42, the requirement of some sort of interaction with outside researchers and or agencies. A little bit clarification in that would be helpful.
It's just not entirely clear that there's a clear projection forward about how the annotated genome is going to be used relative to the transcriptic, proteomic, other phenotypic data, physical biotic data that has been there. And so if the Secretariat has clear plans on how that's coming together, that would be great. If it would be useful to, have interactions with other colleagues that have already been working in this area, or, get details via publications from these same groups, that might help the Secretariat better chart a path forward of how that annotated genome is going to be used in the future.
Yeah, I think that's clarification of the middle sentence. The last sentence about the collaborations, I think the issue there was that it could be that for a lot of this work, there may not be in-house expertise to do that.
Yes, that's correct.
So maybe this would be a good time for Joseph to clarify whether he thinks that is, and then we could add something to clarify the sentence.
Yes, no, I do understand the point, and I appreciate that. I'm not quite sure how to reword that particular
I can take it
sentence.
up. I mean, it's not critical.
Okay.
There.
Yeah, I think the aim was
I know
to
that
give
comment.
you. I think the aim was to give you an opportunity, you know, say, look, the SRB recommended this. We need to have a workshop or stuff so that you can get people that have those experiences or that are leading research in those areas in. If you think you have those in-house, then we're not sure why we don't have this excitement around that genome. It's not many RFMOs or things, organizations of this kind that have had the opportunity to facilitate the genome annotation and so forth. So there's a lot of effort in that, and we want to see it being used effectively. That's, I guess, the thought behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thank you for that clarification. No, I don't have any suggestions to reword that paragraph. I understand the implications there. So as far as I'm concerned, I think that that sentence could stay.
Okay. Yeah, I think we wanted to include a sentence like that in case, you know, in case you needed justification to hold a workshop, for example, or, you know. That was,
yeah, point taken. Thank you.
Okay, paragraph 43. Bit repetitive from above, but it's just a recommendation. 44. $45. Okay. That wraps up the Biological and Ecosystem Sciences program. And on to the MSE. Paragraph 46, noting.
On the MSE, we were going to check about the exceptional circumstance, so let's keep an eye out for that.
Just, yeah, okay.
And Sean, this is Alan.
Yeah.
When we get to the bottom of this, I have two potential paragraphs, one related to exceptional circumstances that the SRB may want to consider.
Okay. So we noted the tool, impressed by the tool. Noted the estimation error options that are being used. In particular, we recommended continuing to incorporate the actual estimation models. As much as, you know, it's a nice goal to use an empirical type harvest control rule. It seems like, you know, the whole IPHC ecosystem likes having the models. Now, I'm not sure that's an accurate statement. They might hate them, but they're certainly used to them. And jumping outside that, I think, would be a big leap. So, you know, it'd be just a recommendation.
Did you just call that a geekosystem?
Geek. I don't think so. I heard somebody call fishery scientists pointy heads last night, and I was like, oh, come on. 49.
Just a note in 49, at the end there, it's 2 operating models used in the coastwide, or there's 2 used in the coastwide operating model. Just the 2 long, or the 2 coastwide.
So yeah, okay.
Is this supposed to be a period?
I think so.
I think it's a comma. This is just supposed to be like that. Yeah, I think that's how it goes. 50, recommend. Okay, so this, we're trying to understand why we're recommending this. This one was suggested. So our interpretation of what people are looking for from the SRB at this point, as far as the MSE is, and I think I brought this up yesterday, that whether this action here is to endorse or recommend, and then Alan, I believe you said recommend, it's fine. Basically, giving kind of a thumbs up to the current state of the MSE, of the operating model and the whole framework for evaluating.
Yeah, and encouragement for the MSAB to actually try and make some decision based upon it.
Yeah, and so that's the noted part, is that these things are going to be conditional on parameters and processes that are uncertain, and then there was, and I think we were kind of responding a bit to the peer review that suggested it may be too early to adopt a procedure and to instead run parallel procedure and the existing approach. And so we just wanted to point out that it's not clear that just because you're uncertain about the whole MSE, that is actually, that you're better off doing whatever process, however ambiguous it is, has been, that process is better. So it could be that adopting a formal management procedure might actually be the less risky option than continuing to.
Particularly at the currently quite low stock status.
Yeah. And recognizing exactly that the current stock status is getting in a region that may require more urgency. So that's the point behind that.
So Sean, this is Alan. I really appreciate this paragraph. I'm just wondering, because I know I'll be the one that has to answer questions on what this paragraph means.
That's what I was saying to the SRB. Like, I'm going to stand up there at the annual meeting and they're going to ask me a really awkward question about this.
Yeah, I'm sure they will, and you'll look at me, right? And so I'm just wondering if we might be able to make it really clear what potentially creates less risk, because it might be ambiguous just reading the paragraph on its own. With your explanation made it clear that adopting a formal management procedure may create less risk, but I don't know that's clear to a new reader.
You think it kind of stems from the idea in the review that the TAC has been, or the TECY has been pushing the bounds in this ad hoc management procedure, that flexibility element that they want, it produces a bias estimate or bias quota, and so that's always going to come back and bite you, particularly when your stock isn't very well. Whereas if you have a system that's at least unbiased, hopefully it won't cause you too much grief. I think that's where the uncertain, or the difference in the uncertainty. I also wanted to ask you why you think that the processes are remaining highly uncertain compared to the stock assessment. There's no better and no worse, really, is it?
Well, definitely. I mean, yeah. Stock and recruitment, for example, highly uncertain. I mean, you can't estimate stock productivity steepness, as an example. And that'll be a major driver.
Certainly for your MSE, it's going to be, but okay. Well, I wasn't tied to it. I was just wanted a bit more clarification of what you class as highly uncertain.
Yeah,
to me, that says you know nothing.
Yeah, well, I took that out, so.
Yeah, okay.
Tone it down a bit.
I'm still wondering, is it the uncertainty that creates less risk, or is it the not adopting a repeatable management procedure, or adopting just so I'm clear?
Yeah, no, that's, I've messed it up in the editing here, so it definitely needs more work. It could be that.
The background, Alan, is that we read this and I said, well, it seems to undercut the recommendation to use it. And then we tried to beef it up again.
Okay, so this is my point. I'll type it out and see what you think.
Okay, thanks. Okay, that is how I was interpreting it. Now I think it's very clear, and I can easily explain that.
Okay.
Hi, it's Anne-Marie.
Kiara, do it.
Anne-Marie?
The current one is actually one of the MPs in the MSE. Does that mess this up?
Well, an approximation of a repeatable approximation of the current one is one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, not. It's hard to say whether the current approach is a procedure. So let me see here. Uncertainty in applying. Yeah.
We just say ad hoc management process, because that's.
Well, I don't want to offend anybody. I don't think it's really,
I know,
really ad hoc.
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, that makes sense to me, and I think it's a general reason that MSEs are done, so it has a lot of backing.
Okay.
We're still missing those two those exceptional circumstance
that's
paragraph.
what's going here.
So if you would like, I have a paragraph, the SRB agreed or noted that exceptional circumstances should be defined to determine if the MSE simulations, the MSE simulations have departed from future observations. Simulations, yeah.
Well, whether conditions, whether
dates.
I'm thinking of data, like whether the data.
Yeah. Whether, and I just put it as future observations, but yeah.
Departed?
Yeah, or yeah. from the MSE or from, yeah, expected MSE. And then, yeah, and then potentially a sentence saying this may warrant a reinvestigation of the operating model and assumptions, something along that line.
Or, yeah.
A bit optimistic there. They haven't. We've just recommended that they close, well, that they accept the MSE process, and you're talking about reopening it.
Under exceptional circumstances.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Alan, this is Kim. I'm guessing that political decisions outside of the MSC are not exceptional circumstances.
I think, well, yeah, I suppose potentially some political decisions could be an exceptional circumstance. Perhaps a decision to do something different in the fishery might be an exceptional circumstances that wasn't tested in the MSE, for example. And one of those might be a change in the catch sharing plan in one of the Alaska regions, for example, that has a significant effect on that area, something like that.
Yeah, I don't know if I would do that. I wouldn't define that as exceptional circumstances because somebody might. So this was my scenario that I thought why you need this, because you could have a situation where, let's say 3A, everybody agrees to a particular procedure, everything looks good, you start running it and you're going along, and then 5 years down the line, 3A's allocation of the proportion of the quota, say, or whatever it is, their total amount has gone down by 15%.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're kind of right on the edge of the acceptable variation in TAC, and they're also down from, they thought this was going to work out great for them. Now they're down. So they could say, whoa, this thing isn't working. And so you would have to have something in place to say, okay, what is it that you see that tells you, what is your evidence that this is not working, besides the fact that your catch has gone down, because that's not it.
Right.
Look, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So then they could say, well, look, here's the original projections that you guys provided under this procedure. And so here's the distribution. And then here's the survey in our area. So you could have a distribution going out, and then the survey is outside of the, say, 95% limits on that projection. In which case you'd say, well, okay, you have a legitimate beef. Right?
Yeah.
Whereas if it's inside the distribution, you say, okay, well, no, that was included.
Yeah.
The scenario that's playing out for you was included in the simulations, and it might be good to go through this exercise before people adopt a procedure. So,
and I'm wondering if Kim might have been asking something like, we've made certain assumptions about how quotas allocated amongst the different sectors within a regulatory area, and if for some reason a decision was made to change that, which is not actually a part of our testing of the management procedures, that's external to this MSE. if that was to change, which had some pretty drastic effects on the commercial fishery in 3A, for example, that were not part of our range of testing, could that be defined as an exceptional circumstance?
It could be, but you wouldn't want people going off and doing stuff so that
Exactly.
they kick off exceptional circumstances.
Yeah.
So
I'm wondering, Sean, if Pierre and I can go away and think about some exceptional circumstances, some potential ones, to then bring to MSAB 16 for further discussion and then to the commission later, would it be okay to maybe bounce a couple ideas off you in the next couple weeks? I mean, just a really quick, simple email, and you can just say, yeah, you're on track or not.
Yeah, definitely. You know, one of the things that I don't like about the way these are defined in some other cases are that they use this as a reason to depart from the procedure.
Yeah.
And I don't like that either, right? You're saying, okay, well, we have this thing that explains 95% of the projection, but now that we're, you know, one thing has popped out, caused exceptional circumstances, that we're going to drop it all and then take some action that we never actually tested. So unless it's something that is, you know, by default takes a conservative, you know, it could be that, you know, if, like you say, you have some kind of empirical thing where you can say, if the data go outside this range, then let's say it goes, instead of going like the 3A example, where it went above the distribution, let's say it drops below. Let's say the coast-wide index comes in way below the 95% limit, then you'd say, okay, exceptional circumstances, drop, you know, cut the TAC by 30% or something while we redo the work. So think along those lines, you know.
Okay, yeah.
Things that are not going to create more, you know, more untested options.
Yeah. No, I think that'll be great. And the stakeholders as well as the commissioners would appreciate that. So we'll put a bit of work on that, bounce a few ideas off of you, and just make sure we're on track.
I think we have to also make sure that how exceptional circumstances is worded in the review, the reason being that certainly some of the examples he gave after his presentation, such as the survey not happening, isn't really an exceptional circumstance. You can simulate that within the MSE, and it just means you have to take less yield. That's not really an exceptional circumstance in my understanding of it. It's covered by the dynamics. It's just something has changed. It's not that the dynamics are wrong or the model is insufficient, which is really where the exceptional circumstances should come in.
Yeah, I remember the IWC, they had one an example where there were no surveys, like surveys just stopped forever. And the point there is, you say, okay, what'll happen? And what happened in their simulations is that basically phased out the fishery, phased out the harvesting, which is what you would expect. You know, that would be a safe response to that, to that particular event. So,
all right. Well, thank you.
So just note.
Sorry, Ben.
Some additions here. Sorry, Sven.
Yeah. Just to make sure then that if there are differences in the definition of the exceptional circumstances in the independent review, which I haven't checked again, that we make sure that they don't get confused by this when we say something completely different from the SRB without noting that we mean something different. So somebody needs to quickly check that.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is provide SRB feedback to the review to Trevor.
Yeah.
And we'll give that direction to him. I think that those
Okay.
suggestions to him for how to revise his so that these things are aligned.
Okay, it's fine.
Okay, now Alan had.
Yeah, Sean, at the end of the presentation yesterday, you asked or you made the comment about making plots of the trade-offs between, say, TCY and 2 regulatory areas. I'm not sure if you wanted a point in that, a request of the as you saw, we're already doing that, but I had written something like plots of the trade-offs between performance metrics for 2 regulatory areas. Yeah, and that, I mean, will that captures what you were talking about yesterday to me.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I think this section looks great.
Okay. And that brings us to item 9, which is adoption of the report.
Thanks, Sean. And just also note that we have added in those fishery independent setline survey maps into Appendix 4. So that's the 2021 design, and then also 2022 and 2023 as figures A, B, and C. Just a reminder that.
If you could go back to the beginning again, I don't see Carrie, but we have Anne Marie here. We didn't put anything in about the observer comments from some of the introductory remarks from the observers. Would it be possible for Anne Marie to put something in where we have that placeholder?
I wrote one down. I remember. I think.
I think for me, it was mostly that the commissioners were happy to see the progress that staff had made, particularly for the things that they know or that I noted that they were concerned about at the June SRB meeting. And that the one possible new thing was around the migration portion in the MSE model, and how how it was being modeled was differing from the observed data.
The comment was about discrepancies between observed and modeled migrations, though, wasn't it, Anne Marie?
Yeah, it was.
Yes.
Was it? Via what? What's the tagging, or what was that derived from?
It was.
Pip tags?
They were estimates from movement estimates, so it was an aggregation of tagging data, some assumptions, and Alan had a list of things that had gone into it.
Yeah, previous research, tagging, and some assumptions for young fish.
And that should be estimated movement data.
Yeah, I was just gonna add that. I would not put observed movement data.
I wish we could observe it.
Trying to get it all in here. Observe between estimated. How about, yeah. Estimated
Or field estimates of movement.
movement rates. Those are movement rates.
Well, maybe it's just a model of movement. Once you've stuck all that, the data and the, yeah. Anyway,
it's actually several different models of movement from different studies.
This one could be a long paragraph, but it's okay.
Yeah. But Anne Marie, does this capture it? This is your.
Yes.
Okay. And so the point is the potential consequences of this, right?
Yes.
Well,
when interpreting MSC results.
Catholic potential. Potential implications for MSC results. That's pretty generic. Okay.
So just with that paragraph, Sean, what we'll do is we'll just move it up as we normally do, because the end of paragraph 9 is where we normally list all of those items. So it would be from number 1 there is where it would start about. Number 1 would be potential differences between estimated, and then it would just continue on the numbering from there. But that's okay, we'll do that afterwards.
Okay,
that's just
thanks.
a straight movement.
Okay, any other last minute?
Yep, I noticed my email is the wrong one, but I'm sure David. Yeah, you just scrolled by it.
We gotta fix that. Here it is. Yeah, well, we're gonna fix that right now.
That's right. You changed it, didn't you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll make sure we correct that. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm noting Carrie had to jump off for another call. She had emailed me saying she can jump back on if you want her to repeat any of the comments you made and feel they're important to put in.
Well, we feel they're important if we didn't catch them.
Okay.
I think
But
she
probably has everything we need, though, Alan. It's just a note of the observer points, and if anybody can recall them to put into that paragraph. But otherwise, it sounds like we're pretty good.
The one thing I recall Carrie saying is that that she sees a challenge, or that not that it's a challenge, but it's there'll be work done to communicate the MSC information to commissioners. I can't remember exactly how she said it.
Yeah, I actually have that exact same thing that I wrote down. I think she was kind of trying to get us to, where possible, help with this communication. I believe that was the point.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd written down what are efficient ways to communicate the information to commissioners. I don't know how you would phrase that though. And Carrie actually replied to me saying she is busy and unable to join the SRB at this point in time.
So we'll just put words in her mouth.
Yeah.
That's why you have to attend all 3 meetings, all 3 days of meetings, even if it gets late.
Like midnight, Sven?
Well, it's not bad today, is it?
No.
It's in the 20 to 10.
Oh, good.
Okay. And yeah, so if I don't know, Gary wants to clarify that or not, but all right. So I am proposing that we adopt this report. I guess I could go for any objections. Hearing none, I bang the gavel. The report is adopted.
Thank you very much. So if you can make sure you save that and then email it to me, we'll take care of that and publish later this afternoon.
Okay. Give presentation back to you. You guys.
Thanks for your
Okay.
help.
Yeah.
I was just going to say we don't have anything else, so over to you if you want to close out, Sean.
I'm going to send this to you and then close so that it's officially closed.
While you're doing that, the only other thing I just want to remind you all of, you have indicated you want to communicate with Trevor, and he has just emailed me just indicating that he hasn't received any comments yet, which is understandable. But if you can try and get comments on the report, the MSCP review, to him as quickly as possible, preferably today or tomorrow, that would be fantastic. So I guess tomorrow for you, Sven.
Do you think it would be possible then just to keep the SRB on the line here, and we can maybe draft a paragraph that I can email to him?
Yeah, we can just leave the meeting open. Everybody else can sign out, and we can just let you go ahead.
We can also retreat to our closed meeting, can't we?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea as well.
Okay, let's do that. So we'll officially close this meeting. See you all at SRB017. And
thank you very
thanks
much,
for all of
everyone.
your great input.
Yep, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for all the presentations.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.